Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's HCL Tech Brief for One Test. My name is Kim Splain. I'll be your moderator today. I'd like to go over just a couple quick housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, the session is being recorded, so if you prefer not to participate in the recorded session, please go ahead and drop from the call now. And then during the webinar, we'd like to ask you to please type your questions in the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. And if we have time at the end, we'll take a minute to review some of those questions. That is it for housekeeping. So thanks again for taking the time to join us today. We hope you enjoy the webinar. I'm going to hand things over to Adam to get us started.
Thank you, Kim. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming today. Glad to have you here. We're here for Azure Dreams, leveraging Azure DevOps with HCL One Test. This is part of the ongoing HCL DevOps Tech Brief series, specifically for the One Test product. And these are designed to be small, digestible nuggets of functionality and features available to the One Test platform. We do have an hour scheduled today, but we should be able to get you in and out in about 20 minutes on here. We just want to go over, highlight what the Azure integration is with DevOps or with One Test, how you can take advantage of it, and give you a quick demo and show how it works. If you've had a chance to attend our Amplify session previously on this, a lot of this material will probably be familiar to you on here, but we wanted to open up to the larger One Test community and the larger HCL DevOps community as well too. So thank you. Real quick, my name is Adam Massoni. I'm a product manager on the HCL One Test product. I joined the organization last year. With me today is Stuart Walker. Stuart, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Of course, yeah. Hi everyone, Stuart Walker here. I'm one of the One Test technical specialists. I'm happy to be here today.
Stuart will be guiding us through the demo portion, so happy to have him with us as well too. So just as a brief overview, One Test is part of HCL's complete DevOps solution. We have a complete DevOps portfolio available for all your DevOps needs. Continuous integration, continuous deployment. If you have a need for it, we have something available for you in the space. If you haven't had a chance to check out our other products, I definitely recommend you take a look. And this is just a brief overview of our loop and where HCL One Test fits in within that loop there. One of the great things about our DevOps portfolio is it plays nice with your existing environment. So if you have other solutions available as part of your continuous integration, continuous deployment suite, we have something available that can work with it and take advantage of it and help expand and grow what you have here. Speaking of which, that's probably why you're here today, because we're going to show how One Test works with Azure DevOps. But as a brief overview, before we get to that, I just want to talk about what One Test capabilities are. As I mentioned, we are a complete testing suite. We offer UI testing, performance testing, and API testing. So think about testing the interfaces of your applications that you are building. Think about testing performance of it. If you're curious about how your web pages are performing on your app or your app itself, mobile, where your bottlenecks are, where your limitations are, identifying those and being able to remediate and address those, or through your API as well too. We have a complete testing suite available to address and handle all of those. In addition to that, we allow for service virtualization, make your testing even easier. You don't have to have all of your services available when building out or running your tests or performing your solutions. And this is extremely useful as well too if you're talking to third-party services. It makes sense, especially from trying to test your application's capabilities. If you want to make sure you don't have limitations on your side before you start bringing in your third parties, this is a great feature part of the One Test suite. In addition to that, we have test data fabrication, which is another part of the puzzle here, and that allows for generating synthetic data sets for your testing environment. This helps you maximize coverage. Think about if you want to do load testing with multiple users, or you want to test a whole variety of parameters on your users, or inputs or forms or anything really where you need to be able to generate data. We have the capability within the product suite to do that. All of this is part of One Test Studio. And in addition to that, a lot of this functionality is exposed through our One Test Server, and that's where we're going to be focusing the majority of our features on today. The One Test Server. And again, the One Test Server brings enterprise grade scalability, collaboration, and security to the One Test product. The idea is being able to run your tests from the cloud, whether it be a cloud of your choice or a cloud in your own premises or or on premises in your own environment. I'm getting a little ahead of myself with that, but we'll touch on that in a moment there as well too. The server allows for configuration, execution, and monitoring of tests, and it can be integrated with your continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines. And we're going to get to that in a moment as well too, but we are investing significantly in this product and enhancing it significantly with every release as well too. The idea is being able to have the centralized location. You can go to view your tests, run them from, and be able to really drive your product forward from a centralized location. So as I was getting ahead of myself here, I want to talk a little bit about deployment on it, because this is one of the key things you are here to see as well too. You can deploy the One Test Server into the environment of your choice. We are fully cloud ready with this. And especially we can integrate with many third-party toolkits and environments as well. And I think the one you are interested in here is the Azure DevOps suite, and why everyone is here joining us today to learn about this. So speaking of continuous integration, continuous delivery solutions, and third-party integration, we have our Azure DevOps integration. And this is available from the Visual Studio Marketplace to get the integration. It is available for free if you have the One Test Studio available and you're running the One Test Server. And this enables the integration of One Test with the Azure DevOps pipeline. We have plugins available for One Test UI, Performance, API, and our server-based execution tasks. And as you can see here, we allow for simple configuration and scripting of it, or as well too, you can run your execution on remote or configured agents as well. And just as a brief note on here as well too, you can see where you can pull this from on the Azure Marketplace. If you go through and just do a quick search for HCL, you'll get the integrations listed on there as well. So some of the key features available in the integration is the ability to execute your tests from the Azure DevOps, view your tests in progress, take a look at the results, and raise issues within Azure DevOps. I really don't want to hang on this slide too long, because one of the key things here is, rather than talking about this, the whole point here is to be able to show you guys what we're able to do here and demonstrate it as well too. And to that end, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Stuart, and he's going to take us on a wonderful Azure DevOps journey. Stuart, feel free to take over.
Thank you, Adam. Kim, if you could make me the presenter so I can share my screen. Perfect. And we'll just make sure it's showing the right screen. So hopefully you'll be able to see the One Test Server now.
Yes.
Wonderful. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Adam. So as we said, we're going to try and...
Sorry, Stuart, one thing real quick as well too, I forgot to mention, while you're watching this demo, please think of any questions you have, and we'll be happy to go over and answer them at the end as well too. Sorry, Stuart, didn't mean to co-op you on that. Go right ahead and take it away.
No problem, no problem. Questions are good. So yeah, wanted to add some color to what Adam has just described in the slides. So we're going to look at the One Test Server. A lot of you will have been made familiar from use of the One Test Server, or you've seen demos of One Test Server before. We're not going to go into depth on what the One Test Server is, more towards the Azure specific components. So first and foremost, Azure as a platform can be used to deploy the One Test Server. And in fact, the One Test Server you're going to see in this demonstration today is deployed into my Azure subscription, into AKS, and depending on what your organization is using, you might be using Azure for your cloud resources. You might not be using Azure for your cloud resources. You could still be using Azure DevOps. I guess most customers probably use both. So we thought we'd drop this in here. In terms of how we set this up, we provide comprehensive documentation to walk you through step by step how to prepare the environment ready for deployment, where to find the charts and how to get that all installed in your Azure subscription. And then obviously you have some choices about how you deploy that. But what we try to achieve is, sorry, let me just go to the right place in the node pools. We try to set you up with a sustainable environment wherein you have the core services and systems running inside one node pool. We call it sys0 in our case. And the work or the sort of ephemeral tasks, if you like, that are going to be performed. In our case, it's going to be test execution or service virtualization execution or jobs that are about to be run. They will run in a separate node pool, and within your Azure subscription, you can configure auto scaling, so you can keep control of costs, and you don't have to have large data centers running 24/7 with all of the capacity there that you need. And we'll talk a little bit more about capacity and cloud scale towards the end of the session when we talk about some upcoming features. But just before we do move on, I'll just show you, you can see the various pods running inside the One Test Server in AKS. And if we scroll right down to the bottom, we'll see some of the execution pods running in our worker node down here. Execution pods being where our tests have been executed. So we won't say any more about that. It's a little bit of a dry subject, but you should know it is possible to run the One Test Server in your AKS environment. Moving on then to talk about Azure DevOps. As Adam said, the One Test Studio plugin is available in the marketplace. You can get it. There's no charge for that. You can install it into your organization in Azure DevOps. And it's quite simple to do so. So let's jump over to Azure DevOps and have a quick look at how those tasks are integrated. And there are two ways primarily that you would integrate our tasks. But before we do that, I'm going to show a very quick sort of diagrammatic view of how you might use OneTest in context of Azure. There is no prescriptive way to achieve this. Obviously, everybody does things slightly differently, but this is probably a common pattern. So we have our One Test Studio. These are the authoring tools for developing your test assets. So whether that be a user interface test, a mobile test, a performance test, an API test, whatever that happens to be, your developer, your tester is going to build those tests in One Test Studio, and they will commit those into Git. Git is an essential component of how OneTest operates. Now, the developer of your application code, I imagine, is going to use Git or some other code repository, and they'll use their pipeline to deploy their application. At which point they have two options when it comes to running tests. And this depends on the type of organization you are and the type of applications you're testing as to which or whether you will use both of these options. There is a more traditional agent-based execution model, wherein on a workstation, on a server, on a virtual machine, you provision the test tools, and the test tools will test your application. Now, why would you do that? Well, if you are testing a thick client application running on Windows, for example, maybe a Java app or a .NET app or a mainframe based service, you would provision a virtual machine or a physical machine where that application exists, and we would instrument and test it. And you can use all of our test tools in that way if you choose to do so. It's a more traditional sort of on-premise approach to testing. And we mirror this pattern with other deployment tools and pipelines, Jenkins being one example. The other option, and this isn't an exclusive option, you can use the two in combination, is to use our One Test Server. And you would use your Azure DevOps pipeline to call into the One Test Server, which can then trigger execution of tests centrally within the containerized environment and feed the results back into your pipelines, just the same as they would using the traditional One Test Studio. But instead of needing to provision a VM or a physical machine, you can call into this centralized component managed by your organization, and it will take care of the execution and reporting for you. Now, there are limitations of that because this is a Kubernetes environment, and so you can't necessarily run all types of tests. If you were running against, let's say, a terminal emulator against a mainframe, or you're running against SAP GUI or some thick client application that needs to be installed on Windows or something else. So usually, customers will use these in conjunction with one another, and ultimately the reports will then feed their way up through your Azure dashboards to your teams. So jumping back then to the Azure DevOps dashboard, I said there are a couple of ways in which we can use those OneTest tasks. The first way is within a release. So here I have a release that's building an application and deploying it. And if I have a look at the definition of this one and only stage I have in this release, you can see it's quite straightforward. I'm deploying my app, and I'm deploying test assemblies and so on from Visual Studio. And if I want to add a OneTest task into here, I simply, once I've installed the plugin, I simply search for it, and I can choose the appropriate task. So the appropriate tasks being the 3 different Workbench products for the more traditional agent style of execution, or the 4th one being the One Test Server task, that being that centralized component that we would then call into. Now, I can add these tasks into this release, and I can move them around to put them wherever I want to put them, and I'll ultimately then configure this task. So here the task is asking me for a name, it's asking me for some of the configuration details I'll need to connect to the One Test Server. In our case, we have a service connection. I've already configured a couple, and we can just have a very quick look down here at how that's done in the service connections panel. So if I were to add a new service connection, I'll choose One Test Server, and I'll provide the URL of the server that I'm hosting. In my case, obviously it's over here, my HCL One Test Corp internal URL, and I would provide a token and give it a name. And at that point, then I can use that within either my release pipelines or my more ad hoc pipelines. So let's have a look at the definition of a pipeline. Over here, we've got a pipeline task that has clearly failed in its execution. So we can click through and have a quick look at the definition of that pipeline before we see why it failed. And here you can see a different view of a pipeline. This is a DevOps starter pipeline, so we can actually see the YAML configuration. And here we've got the settings for a task of type HCL One Test UI. So this would be to run a suite of user interface tests. Of course, if you were running API or performance or something else, you would use a different type of task, or you could use one preceding the other. And again, the configuration over here on the right-hand side can be done in this helpful template, or can be done by simply configuring the YAML down here. And you'll see once the test has completed, what we're doing is obviously we store all of the results in our One Test Server, but that's not much use to you here in Azure DevOps. So what we do is we pass the JUnit format reports back into your Azure boards so that you can see the results of execution. So if we just jump back and have a quick look at this, we'll see, okay, we can see why this particular pipeline failed. It failed because there was one test failure, and detailed results can be seen in the tests tab. And if we go over the test tab, we can see, sure enough, 7 of the tests were executed, 6 passed and 1 failed. And we can feed all of that into our test plans and into the test runs, so that all that is available to you, and you can use it in the way that you're accustomed to using Azure DevOps. Now, of course, we, as I say, host that information as well in the One Test Server. And in the One Test Server, we have a much more detailed, more comprehensive view of what happened in the test. And there are different types of reports that we can see for those tests. In this case, a very, very simple user interface style test, and we can see what happened. We loaded bing.com, we clicked on a search field, and we can see all the images of everything that happened there. We can see a carousel of actions as they go through, and ultimately we see that this test failed because there was a missing link, or the link wasn't quite right as per the test definition. So the test failed and has fed back that result not only into our dashboard here in Azure, but also in the One Test Server. Now in the One Test Server, another integration that we have into Azure DevOps is to raise defects, to raise work items or defects or bugs into your Azure DevOps organization. So from here, I have a failed test. I've reviewed the test, and I'm certain that I have a cause to raise some kind of a bug. I've pre-integrated to Azure DevOps. We also integrate to Jenkins, to Jira, sorry. And I can hit the button, and it's pre-templated with all the properties that I need to set. So I can choose my project, I can choose the work item type. In this case, it's going to be a bug. I can give it a title, and I can add some description, demo of failure. And when we hit create, that then will create that defect in the system for us. I suspect it's created defect number 6 there. And once we log into our organization, we will then see that defect has been raised, this new defect in the Amplify demo. And actually, I may have picked the wrong one. Maybe it was number 5, because I had used this before. Let's just make sure we get the right one, so you don't think there's any magic here. This is the trouble of using the same demo system for multiple demos. They're all connected to different places. Here we go. So here's our HCL Azure Marketplace test that failed. And if we want to see the details of that, we can see down here the demo of our failure. And we could build a work item or a workflow from that as we see fit. So that's a very quick run through of what we can do from the current perspective, looking at our Azure DevOps pipeline and release tasks using our service connection to the One Test Server, or using the desktop agents. Looking further out into the future, we obviously have a significant roadmap of items, and I just wanted to show one of those in actually one of our demo development systems, should I say. This is not yet released. It's due to be released later this year. So no warranties or guarantees are provided to what this will look like in the actual release product, but just to give you an idea of something that we're working on. Now we talked a little bit earlier about scale and using cloud for what it's really there for, to help us achieve agility and scale of execution from a hardware perspective. And we've supported for a long time this ability to add extendable execution capacity to the server through remote Kubernetes clusters and registering those to the One Test Server, and remote Docker hosts, registering them in, so that when we come to run tests, we might be running a performance test or an API test or whatever, and we want to run it somewhere else, we've got this capacity to choose where we want to run them. What we're adding in an upcoming release is cloud credentials. So instead of saying I have this managed Kubernetes cluster that I want to connect to, what you can now do is you can say, actually, I'd like to provide some credentials to my Azure cloud subscription. And you would provide your subscription ID and the details required to make that connection, which we will then manage for you. And if we have a look at, I don't know, one of these, ignore the data, it's all kind of dummy data at the moment, but what we will then do is allow you to use this connection for test execution, so that we can spin up the resources as needed and spin them down as needed where you need additional capacity. And of course, that does bring with it risks. If there are any budget owners are on the call. Maybe you're thinking, oh, this could end badly for me if I end up with a very big bill at the end of the month where everybody's been off using our cloud subscription. We've thought about that, and we've added the ability to limit costs. So you can specify the maximum cost over a given period. You can specify a member list of people who are allowed to use that subscription. And you can also determine whether and how you want to manage the resources that are being used. So in other words, if I am running testing for my pipelines very frequently and I want to use these resources for that purpose, I probably want to leave them running 24/7 because I don't want the time to spin them up and to spin them down. However, if this is more of a burst capacity requirement and it's an infrequent or almost manual need for spinning up these additional hosts, then you can specify an idle time, or you can even specify a destroy time, so that if it hasn't been used within a minute or 10 minutes or whatever it might be, we will tear that down and you won't be getting charged for it. So that's something that's coming down the line. We won't just be providing this in an Azure context. We will be doing this for other cloud vendors as well. But Azure is one of the first ones because we appreciate a lot of our customers are very invested in Azure, and as are we. So with that, I will stop sharing and I will pass back to Adam.
Awesome, beautiful demo, Stuart. Thank you. And let me go ahead and I will resume sharing off my desktop as well too. All right. We should be back in business here. Again, absolutely beautiful demo, Stuart. It really highlights a lot of what we have as well as what we have coming down the roadmap for you guys. And I'll talk about that in a moment as well too. Real quick as well though too, hitting on that, we do have a briefing available in the Azure Marketplace. If there's a prospect or anybody you think might be interested in this as well, you can direct them over that way, and they can get a free consultation on it. It'll highlight a lot of what we've done here and talked about today as well, but it's just another option and tool we have available for you to be able to utilize. So real quick as well too, as we talked about the HCL One Test Azure journey, we are heavily invested in this. This is not going away. This is not something where we're going to be able to point and say we're done. As emphasized, as Stuart was able to show some of the stuff we have coming down the pipeline here, you can see starting in 2020 and all the way into this quarter and beyond, we are continuing to build out and enhance this functionality here. The stuff Stuart showed here as well too, with work item creation and click to remote K3 support, really kind of awesome. And then as we look into the future as well too, we are looking at supporting GitHub Actions and Azure Test Plan integrations, and those will be coming in the future as well. So if this is something you were looking at, if this is something that you are interested in, keep in mind that it is an actively enhanced and built upon integration we have going on here. And on that note as well too, if you have any ideas that you'd like to see for this integration, please let us know. We do have an ideas portal available at HCL Tech at the URL on the slide here. You're able to go there and submit enhancements, and I guarantee you this will be reviewed by the product management team. We love to see stuff coming through on here because it helps tell us what people trying to use these integrations are able to, or want to do, or what they are using as well too, and it helps drive our roadmap. So again, please, if you ever have an idea, and not just for the Azure integration, but for any of the One Test product suite, please feel free to go on there and drop us an idea and take a look at it. As well too, if you might notice on the other side of the slide here, come see us at Star East. We are going to be at Star East next week. I will be there, Stuart will be there, Chris Hagen will be there as well too. We will actually have floor space in a booth, and we'll be present at that booth on the 27th and 28th, I believe. And Star East runs from April 24th to the 29th, so there's plenty of sessions there as well too. And on that note, I guess I'll go ahead and wrap this up. and say, hey, if there's any questions, we will be more than happy to answer that. But thank you everyone for joining and attending today. It's been a pleasure to talk about this, and we are, as I said, we are really, really excited with what we're able to demonstrate and show with what we're doing here.